Padre Pio gazed at Emily in the confessional, and what he saw brought tears to his eyes, not tears of compassion, but tears of pain, for Emily's soul was shackled, bound by chains, chains she had forged herself, chains she had strengthened day after day, year after year, chains made of grudges, of simmering anger, and a stubborn refusal to forgive. This woman's name was Emily, and she had come to Padre Pio seeking his prayers. She suffered from chronic pain that baffled doctors, pain in her chest, in her shoulders, in her back, pain that robbed her of sleep, pain that never seemed to leave her. But when she knelt before Padre Pio, the saint didn't focus on her physical ailments. He spoke directly to her soul. He said, "I see why you suffer, Emily. I see the source of all your pain. It doesn't reside in your body. It dwells in your heart. And until you remove it, no doctor, no amount of prayer can truly heal you." Emily was shocked. She couldn't comprehend what Padre Pio meant. She had no idea what he saw within her soul. Padre Pio gently asked, "How long have you been refusing to forgive your husband, Michael?" Emily felt her heart freeze. How could he possibly know? She had never spoken of it to anyone. She had never confessed this sin. She had never even admitted, not even to herself, that she harbored this unforgiving spirit. She stammered, "Father, I don't understand. I have forgiven my husband. I told him I forgave him." Padre Pio shook his head sadly. He said, "You spoke the words, Emily, but your heart has never embraced them. You've lived with this man for years, pretending to have forgiven him. But each day, you replay what he did in your mind. Each day, you punish him in silence. Each day, you tighten the chains that bind your soul." Emily began to weep because she knew Padre Pio was right. She knew she had never truly forgiven Michael. She knew she had carried this resentment for 15 long years. She knew this bitterness was devouring her from the inside out. What I'm about to share with you today comes from the accounts of those who encountered Padre Pio in the confessional. The saint possessed an extraordinary ability, a supernatural clarity to see into people's souls, and what he saw most often weren't the grand mortal sins, but the small festering grudges, the ancient resentments, the acts of forgiveness withheld, the closed-off hearts. Padre Pio often said that the refusal to forgive was one of the most destructive sins of all, not because it was the gravest according to the Catechism, but because it was the most insidious. It took root silently, it grew in the shadows, and it eventually poisoned the entire spiritual life of a person. I want to tell you the complete story of Emily, because her story may also be your story, or the story of someone you know, someone you deeply care about. Emily had married Michael when she was 23 years old. It was a marriage built on love. They loved each other deeply. They shared dreams, hopes, and aspirations. The early years were filled with happiness. They had 2 beautiful children. They built a home together. They crafted a life together. Then, after 10 years of marriage, Emily made a shattering discovery. She discovered that Michael was having an affair with another woman, a co-worker, an affair that had been ongoing for several months. The revelation was devastating. Emily felt betrayed, humiliated, utterly shattered. Everything she believed in crumbled in an instant. The man she loved, the man to whom she had given her life, the man in whom she had placed her absolute trust, had deceived her. Michael confessed everything. He begged for forgiveness. He said it was a terrible mistake. He promised it would never happen again. He pleaded with Emily to give him a second chance. Emily was a devout Catholic woman. She believed in the sanctity of marriage. She believed in the power of forgiveness. She believed that couples should overcome trials and tribulations together. So she decided to stay. She resolved to rebuild her marriage. She said to Michael, "I forgive you." She spoke those words in front of their children. She said them before her family. She said them before their priest. She did everything a good Catholic wife was supposed to do. But deep down in her heart, she never truly forgave him. She simply buried her pain. She concealed her anger. She pretended everything was fine, when everything was far from it. The years passed. Michael kept his promise. There was never another woman. He was a faithful and present husband. He did everything he could to repair the damage he had caused. But Emily couldn't see it. All she saw was the betrayal. Every time Michael was late coming home from work, she pictured him with the other woman. Every time he received a text message on his phone, she wondered who it was from. Every time he looked at her with affection, she wondered if he had looked at the other woman in the same way. She punished him in 1,000 silent ways. She refused his advances. She spoke to him only when absolutely necessary. She showed him no affection. She lived with him as one might live with a complete stranger. Michael sensed this wall between them. He didn't understand. He had asked for forgiveness. He had changed. He had done everything that had been asked of him. Why couldn't Emily move on? He didn't know that Emily had never truly forgiven him. He didn't know that each day she replayed the betrayal in her mind. He didn't know that each night she fell asleep thinking about what he had done to her. 15 years passed in this way. 15 years of false forgiveness. 15 years of silent resentment. 15 years of a closed-off heart. That's when the pain began. First in her chest, then in her shoulders, then in her back. Pain that had no medical cause, pain that no one could explain. Emily consulted dozens of doctors. She underwent every test imaginable. She tried every treatment available. Nothing worked. The pain persisted. It even worsened. It was a friend who suggested she go see Padre Pio. She had heard that the saint healed inexplicable illnesses. She had heard that he saw things that doctors couldn't. Emily made the journey to San Giovanni Rotondo. She hoped that Padre Pio would pray for her, that he would bless her, that he would heal her of these mysterious pains. She was not prepared for what awaited her. When Padre Pio told her that she had never truly forgiven her husband, Emily initially wanted to protest. She wanted to say it wasn't true, that she had forgiven him, that she had done what was necessary. But the words just wouldn't come out, because deep down she knew Padre Pio was right. She knew she'd been living a lie for 15 long years. Padre Pio then explained what he saw in her soul. He said, "I see chains, heavy, tight chains. They wrap around your heart. They prevent you from breathing. They prevent you from living. These chains, you forged them yourself. Each time you dwell on what your husband did, you add another link. Each time you punish him silently. You tighten those chains a little more. Each time you refuse to truly forgive, you sink deeper into your own prison." Emily asked, "But how can I truly forgive? He hurt me so much. He shattered my trust. He destroyed everything we had." Padre Pio responded, "Forgiveness is not a feeling. It's not something you feel, it's something you decide. You decide to no longer dwell on the offense. You decide to no longer remind the other person of it. You decide to treat the other person as if they had never sinned against you," Emily said. "But that's impossible. I can't just forget what he did." Padre Pio smiled gently. He said, "I am not asking you to forget. Forgiveness is not forgetting. You will always remember what happened. But forgiveness changes the nature of that memory. Instead of being an open wound that still bleeds, it becomes a scar, a reminder of something that has been healed." He continued, "And above all, forgiveness frees you, not him, you. As long as you refuse to forgive, you remain chained to the offense. You give it power over you. You allow it to continue to hurt you, day after day. When you forgive, you break those chains. You take back control of your life. You refuse to let the past dictate your present. Emily asked, "But he doesn't deserve my forgiveness. What he did was terrible." Padre Pio looked at her with an intensity that sent shivers down her spine. He said, "Do you deserve God's forgiveness? Have you always done what is right? Have you never sinned? Have you never hurt anyone? If God only forgave those who deserved it, who would be forgiven?" These words struck Emily like lightning. She had never thought of things that way. She had always seen herself as the innocent victim, as the one who had been wronged. She had never considered her own faults, her own shortcomings, her own sins. Padre Pio continued, "The forgiveness that God offers us is not based on our merit. It is based on His mercy, and He asks us to forgive others in the same way, not because they deserve it, but because we ourselves need to be forgiven." He added, "The Lord's Prayer is very clear on this point. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us." It's not just a poetic phrase, it's a condition. If you do not forgive others, God cannot forgive you. Not because He doesn't want to, but because you yourself are closing the door of your heart to His mercy. Emily began to understand something terrible. She began to realize that for 15 years she had been living in a state of sin. For 15 years she had refused forgiveness to her husband. For 15 years she had closed the door of her heart to the mercy of God. And those physical pains she felt, Padre Pio explained that they were a reflection of what was happening in her soul. The soul and the body are linked, he said. When the soul is sick, the body suffers too. Those chains you wear on your heart, your body feels them as pain. If you want to heal your body, you must first heal your soul. Padre Pio gave her a penance, not an ordinary penance, a penance that would change her life. He told her, "You are going to go home, and tonight you're going to do something you haven't done in 15 years. You are going to talk to your husband, truly talk to him. You are going to tell him the truth. You are going to tell him that you have never forgiven him. You are going to tell him all the pain, all the anger, all the resentment that you have kept inside. And then you are going to ask him to forgive you, not him to you to him. You are going to ask him for forgiveness for these 15 years of silent punishment, for these 15 years of a closed heart, for these 15 years of false forgiveness." Emily was terrified. How could she do that? How could she admit to Michael that she had lied to him for 15 years? How could she ask him for forgiveness when he was the one who was guilty? Padre Pio saw her fear. He said, "I know it's difficult. I know it scares you, but it's the only path to healing. As long as you keep this secret, as long as you continue to live in this lie, the chains will remain, and the pain too." He added, "And when you have done that, when you have truly forgiven and asked for forgiveness, you will come back to see me, and I will give you absolution, not before, not until the forgiveness is real." Emily left that day with an enormous weight on her shoulders, not the weight of the chains, the weight of what she had to do, the weight of the truth she had to tell. The journey home was the longest of her life. She thought about everything Padre Pio had said. She thought about those 15 years of resentment. She thought about all the harm she had done to herself by refusing to forgive. When Emily arrived home that evening, Michael was waiting for her. He had prepared dinner. He asked her how her trip had been. He asked her if Padre Pio had prayed for her. Emily looked at him. This man she had known for over 25 years, this man who had betrayed her, this man who had spent 15 years trying to make amends, this man whom she had punished day after day. For all that time, she took a deep breath and she said, "We need to talk." They sat down in the living room. Emily took Michael's hands in hers. It was the first time she had touched him with affection in years. And she told him everything she had kept inside for 15 years. All the pain, all the anger, all the resentment, all the times she had punished him silently, all the times she had refused his love, all the times she had replayed his betrayal and condemned him again in her heart. Michael listened, weeping. He didn't know. He had never known how much she was suffering. He had believed that the forgiveness was real. He had believed that their marriage was being rebuilt. He hadn't seen the invisible chains she was wearing. When Emily finished, she did something she never thought possible. She asked Michael for forgiveness. She asked him for forgiveness, for 15 years of fake forgiveness, for 15 years of a closed-off heart, for 15 years of silent punishment. And then, for the first time since that terrible discovery, she said to him, "I forgive you, truly. I choose to forgive you. I choose to no longer hold you guilty. I choose to no longer punish you for what you did." That night, something broke. The chains that Padre Pio had seen began to crack. The wall that Emily had built around her heart began to crumble. This wasn't the end of the process. True forgiveness isn't a one-time event. It's a journey. Emily had to choose to forgive again and again. Every time the memory resurfaced, every time the anger welled up, every time she was tempted to return to her old habits. But something had changed. The decision was made, the direction was set, and little by little, day after day, the chains loosened. And the pain? It started to lessen. Not immediately, not miraculously, but gradually. As her soul healed, her body healed too. After a few months, the pain had almost completely disappeared. The following years were the best of their marriage. Emily and Michael rediscovered an intimacy they hadn't known for decades. They learned to truly talk to each other, to share their fears, their hopes, their pains. The wall that separated them had vanished, and in its place there was a bridge. Their children noticed the change. They saw their parents smiling again, touching again, loving again. They didn't know exactly what had happened, but they saw the result. A family finally reconciled, parents finally at peace. Emily returned to see Padre Pio a year later. When she approached the confessional, the saint looked at her and smiled. He said, "I see that the chains have been broken. I see that your heart is free. Now, I can give you absolution." Emily confessed her 15 years of fake forgiveness. She confessed her holding grudges, anger, and refusal to forgive. She confessed the silent punishment she had inflicted on her husband. And Padre Pio gave her absolution. When she came out of the confessional, Emily was crying, but they were tears of joy, tears of liberation. For the first time in 15 years, she felt truly free, truly at peace, truly forgiven. Now, I want to explain to you what Padre Pio taught about forgiveness, because his teaching went far beyond this particular story. It touched the very essence of the Christian life. Padre Pio said that forgiveness was the heart of the gospel, not a secondary detail, not an option among others. The heart. Without forgiveness, he said, everything else is in vain. You can pray for hours every day. You can fast. You can make pilgrimages. You can give all your possessions to the poor. But if you refuse to forgive, all of that is useless. Why is forgiveness so central? Padre Pio explained that it was a matter of consistency. We come before God asking for forgiveness for our sins. We ask Him not to treat us according to our faults. We ask Him for mercy. And at the same time, we refuse to give others what we ask for ourselves. That's a contradiction that God cannot accept, not because He is severe, but because He is just. How can He give us what we refuse to give to others? Padre Pio often told the parable of the unforgiving servant, this servant who owed an enormous sum to his master. The master forgave him of his entire debt, but that same servant refused to forgive another servant who owed him a small sum. When the master learned of this, he took back his forgiveness and had the unforgiving servant thrown into prison. This parable, Padre Pio said, isn't an old story unrelated to our lives. It's an exact description of what happens when we refuse to forgive. We who have been forgiven by God of an immense debt refuse to forgive others for much lesser offenses, and in doing so, we close the door to God's mercy towards ourselves. There's another reason why forgiveness is so important. The refusal to forgive hurts ourselves, not the other person. U.S. Padre Pio used a very telling image. He said that refusing to forgive was like drinking poison, hoping that the other person dies. We hold on to our holding grudges, anger, and refusal to forgive, our desire for revenge, and we think that this punishes the other person. But in reality, it's we who suffer. It's we who carry this weight. It's we who are chained. The other person, the one we refuse to forgive, may very well live their life without any problems. They may not even know that we resent them, or they may not care at all. Our holding grudges, anger, and refusal to forgive doesn't touch them at all, but we are devoured by this holding grudges, anger, and refusal to forgive. It occupies our thoughts. It poisons our relationships. It prevents us from living fully. It keeps us prisoners of the past. Forgiveness frees us from this prison, not them, U.S. Now, I want to talk to you because maybe this video concerns you directly. Maybe you, too, carry chains of holding grudges, anger, and refusal to forgive. Maybe you've refused to forgive someone for years. Maybe you've said the words of forgiveness without ever truly meaning them. The first question I want to ask you is this: is there someone in your life that you haven't forgiven? Take a moment to think about it. It may be a spouse, like in Emily's story. It may be a parent, a child, a brother or a sister, a friend, a colleague, someone who hurt you a long time ago and whom you still resent. If the answer is yes, then I want to tell you something important. This holding grudges, anger, and refusal to forgive is hurting you, not the other person, you. It chains you to the past. It prevents you from moving forward. It poisons your spiritual life, and above all, it closes the door to God's mercy. As long as you refuse to forgive, you cannot be fully forgiven. It's the spiritual law that Jesus himself established. Padre Pio gave 3 pieces of advice for learning to forgive truly. The first piece of advice was to pray for the person who hurt you, not to pray for them to change, not to pray for them to be punished. Pray for their good. Pray for their salvation. Pray for them to receive the graces they need. This prayer is very difficult at the beginning. It may even seem hypocritical. How can you pray for the good of someone you resent? Padre Pio also said that this prayer had a transformative power. It changed our hearts. It made us see others as God sees them. It created a space for forgiveness. The second piece of advice was to remember your own faults. Before judging others, before condemning them, look at yourself. Have you always acted perfectly? Have you never hurt anyone? Have you never needed forgiveness? This reflection doesn't minimize the other person's wrongdoing. What they did is still wrong, but it prevents us from placing ourselves on a pedestal. It reminds us that we too are sinners. It makes us more humble, more compassionate, more willing to forgive. The third piece of advice was to take concrete action toward forgiveness. Not just think about forgiving, not just vaguely feel it, but to do something tangible. Write a letter, make a phone call, have a conversation. Take an action that shows the forgiveness is real. Emily had to talk to her husband. She had to confess the truth to him. She had to ask him for forgiveness. This concrete act was the turning point. It was at that moment that the chains began to break. There was also a fourth piece of advice that Padre Pio sometimes gave. He advised confessing the refusal to forgive. Because refusing to forgive is a sin, a serious sin, a sin that blocks God's grace. Confessing this sin, naming it, regretting it, was already a first step toward healing. Now, I want to talk about the signs of false forgiveness, because many people, like Emily, believe they have forgiven when they haven't. Here's how to recognize if your forgiveness is real or not. First sign of false forgiveness: you constantly rethink the offense. If the memory comes back again and again, if you replay the scene in your head, if you dwell on what happened, then the forgiveness is probably not complete. Second sign: you talk about the offense to others. If you tell everyone what the other person did to you, if you seek to have others condemn them too, if you're building a case against them, then you haven't really forgiven. Third sign: you punish the other person silently. Like Emily, you find subtle ways to make them pay. You're distant. You withhold affection. You subtly remind them of the offense. Then the forgiveness is a facade. Fourth sign: you rejoice when the other person suffers. If their misfortunes please you, if you think they deserve what's happening to them, if you have a secret feeling of satisfaction, then your heart hasn't really forgiven. Fifth sign: you set conditions for reconciliation. You say, "I'll forgive when they change. I'll forgive when they truly apologize. I'll forgive when they've proven they deserve it." These conditions show that the forgiveness is not real. True forgiveness is unconditional. Like God's forgiveness, it doesn't depend on the other person. It depends on our decision, on our choice, on our willingness to let go. Emily's story isn't unique. Padre Pio met hundreds of people who carried the same chains, people who had refused to forgive for years, sometimes decades. And each time, he saw the same thing. He saw imprisoned souls, souls that were suffering, souls that needed to be freed. There was Ethan, a man who hadn't forgiven his brother for 30 years, a dispute over the family inheritance, 30 years without speaking, 30 years of resentment. When Ethan came to see Padre Pio, the saint told him, "You've been carrying your brother on your back for 30 years. You've never left him. You think you've rejected him from your life, but he's with you every day, in your thoughts, in your anger, in your resentment. Forgiveness won't free him. It will free you." There was Ashley, a woman who hadn't forgiven her mother, a mother who had abandoned her as a child. Ashley had grown up with this wound. She had built her life around this wound. She had defined herself by this wound. Padre Pio told her, "Your mother abandoned you once. You abandon yourself every day by refusing to heal." Forgiveness doesn't change the past. It changes your future. There was also Kevin, a man who hadn't forgiven God himself. His daughter had died of an illness at the age of 7, and Kevin was angry at God. He had stopped praying. He had stopped going to church. He had closed his heart to faith. Padre Pio told him something surprising. He told him, "God doesn't need your forgiveness. He has done nothing wrong. But you need to make peace with him. You need to accept what you don't understand. You need to trust him even in the pain." These stories show us that the refusal to forgive takes many forms. It can be against a spouse, like Emily, against a family member, like Ethan, against a parent, like Ashley, against God himself, like Kevin. But whatever the form, the result is always the same: chains, suffering, a soul imprisoned. Padre Pio taught that some offenses are more difficult to forgive than others. He acknowledged this. He never minimized the pain of the people who came to see him. He knew that some wounds were deep, that some betrayals were devastating, that some losses were unbearable. But he also said that the more serious the offense, the more necessary forgiveness was, because the more serious the offense, the heavier the chains. The heavier the chains, the greater the suffering. And the greater the suffering, the more beautiful the liberation would be. There are offenses that seem impossible to forgive. Abuse, violence, the murder of a loved one. How do you forgive these things? Padre Pio didn't give an easy answer. He didn't say it was simple, but he said it was possible. With God's grace, with time, with a choice renewed each day. He told the story of the martyrs, those men and women who forgave their executioners at the very moment of their death. Saint Stephen, the first martyr, who prayed for those who were stoning him. How is this possible? It's possible because forgiveness doesn't come from us. It comes from God. We cannot forgive by our own strength, but we can ask God to forgive through us. That's why Padre Pio insisted so much on prayer. When you can't forgive, pray. Say to God, I can't forgive this person, but you can. Forgive them through me. Give me the grace to want to forgive. Give me the strength to choose forgiveness each day. This prayer is humble. It acknowledges our weakness. It recognizes that forgiveness surpasses our human capabilities. But it opens the door to God's grace. And when that grace enters, forgiveness becomes possible. Even the impossible becomes possible. I also want to talk to you about what happens in the soul when we refuse to forgive. Because what Padre Pio saw wasn't simply a metaphor. It was a spiritual reality. When we hold grudges, we create a spiritual link with the person who hurt us. A negative link. A link of anger and resentment. This link attaches us to them. It prevents us from moving forward. It keeps us stuck in the past. This link also affects our relationship with God, because our heart cannot be both closed and open. If we close our heart to one person, we also close it to God. Mercy cannot enter a heart that refuses to give mercy. That's why Jesus was so clear on this point. In the Gospel of Matthew, he says, "For if you forgive other people when they sin against you, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive others their sins, your Father will not forgive your sins." These words are strong. They may even seem harsh, but they express a fundamental spiritual truth. The forgiveness we give and the forgiveness we receive are linked. They are part of the same movement of grace. Blocking one is blocking the other. Padre Pio saw this reality with his own eyes. He saw the souls open to God's grace, and he saw the souls closed off. The closed-off souls were always the ones who refused to forgive. They had built a wall around themselves, and that wall prevented mercy from entering. This video didn't appear by chance. The revelations I share here come directly from the spiritual legacy of Padre Pio. They have been kept and transmitted carefully to reach you today. Each video like this one requires hours of research in the archives of San Giovanni Rotondo, hours of prayer to discern what to share and how to share it. If what you've heard today has touched your heart, if you feel that this truth can help other struggling souls, then I invite you to become part of this mission. The Super Thanks button you see just below isn't just a simple button. It's your way of saying, yes, these truths must continue to be shared. Yes, other Catholics need to hear this message about forgiveness. When you click on that golden heart, you become a messenger of this wisdom. I'll finish with a prayer for all those who wear the chains of resentment, a prayer for those who haven't yet forgiven, a prayer for those who suffer in their soul and in their body because of a closed heart. Lord, you know the wounds we carry. You know the offenses we have suffered. You know the pain we feel, but you also know the chains we forge ourselves by refusing to forgive. Give us the grace to truly forgive, not with empty words, but with a sincere heart. Help us to see those who have hurt us as you see them. Help us to want good for them despite the evil they have done to us. And above all, free us from these chains that imprison us. We ask you for forgiveness for all the times we have refused to forgive, for all the times we have held grudges, for all the times we have punished others in our hearts. Forgive us as we forgive those who have trespassed against us. Amen. Tell me in the comments, have you ever refused to forgive someone? What did you feel in your heart? Your testimonies can help others understand the importance of forgiveness. Share your experience. I read all the comments, and I pray for each person who writes them. May the light of Padre Pio guide you to forgiveness. May the mercy of God break the chains that imprison you, and may the peace of Christ fill your heart. Finally free. May peace be with you, today and forever.